Well, viewers, those were the headlines and our top focus. Anger continues to grow over the blaze at the Wang Fuk Court housing complex, which has claimed at least 128 lives, with more than 150 people still missing at the moment. The fire, which broke out on the 28th of November, engulfed 7 high-rise blocks in Tai Po. Investigation is underway, focusing on potential corruption and unsafe materials used in recent renovations. Now, authorities have arrested 11 individuals in connection with the incident, but there are growing calls for an independent probe and greater accountability from the government. Meanwhile, China's national security authorities have warned individuals against using the disaster to disrupt peace in the city. The fire alarms in the complex reportedly failed to work, and residents have raised concerns about hazards related to ongoing renovations. With us on the broadcast is Mr. Andrew K.P. Leung. He is a strategist focusing on the Chinese economy and policy. He's joining us from Hong Kong. Thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX World. First up, my condolences for the 128 lives that have been lost. Of course, a probe into this is underway. The Chinese government has emphasized that it's going to be tightening regulations and also chalk out fresh plans that contractors will have to oblige with from now on. But it's not just a short-term solution, because these problems have been persisting for quite a while now. A long-term commitment by contractors to strengthen the manner in which they function is what is of priority at the moment. We do know that anger is simmering to a certain extent amongst the people who are demanding answers, demanding transparency as far as the probe is concerned. How do you think the government should now proceed from here?
Well, this epic catastrophe has attracted the highest level of concern and attention and condolences, of course, from across the world, including the Pope, including King Charles, including many heads of state, but also attracted the attention of the authorities in Beijing, because there are many high rises throughout China. And in fact, this is a phenomenon not peculiar to China, but to other countries around the world. So it's a question of to what extent fire safety standards are adhered to or are adequate, whether this fire equipment are adequately in place and regularly maintained, whether the properties management authorities or management committees are doing their job, whether the fire equipment used is up to the height expected in case of emergency, whether there is sufficient access for these fire service vehicles at the press of a button, whether there is sufficient water pressure to enable the water jets to reach those heights. So there are many questions to be answered. On the one hand, there is an outpouring of grief in Hong Kong. Also, there is also an outpouring of solidarity as people, volunteers, and various businesses are donating money amounting to now nearly $1 billion Hong Kong dollars and counting. On the one hand, there is this outpouring of sympathy and support, but on the other, there are many questions that remain unanswered. Of course, the government is conducting departmental investigations. And it's always a question whether the departmental investigations are adequate, because there could be questions about standards are up to their expectations with the modern high rises, whether the materials defined in those standards are sufficiently fire retardant. So it's a question not only of enforcement, but also of the standards themselves, of regulations, so whether they need to be reviewed. So the Hong Kong government is coming to grips into it, but on the other hand, there is no doubt there is increasing sort of boiling of some public anger. At the same time, there is also outpouring of solidarity amongst the communities.
Absolutely. A quick follow-up to that. We do know there have been 11 people who have been arrested by authorities as of now with regards to the renovation that was taking place in these high-rises. But I also wanted to understand from you, since you have been tracking what's taking place very, very closely, is corruption really prevalent in this sector? Does it then have a direct bearing with the fire that claimed so many lives, or is what's taken place simply going to turn into some sort of blame game?
Well, there are a number of issues involved here. These blocks, there are 8 high-rise blocks involving a total of nearly 2,000 units, representing, of course, 2,000 families. And these blocks are separated by a narrow space, but they're under renovation. They're all covered by kind of tarpaulin or various screens. It's a question whether this tarpaulin and screens are up to fire retardant regulations. And even though certain tests are performed on some of the samples, whether that test could apply to the entirety of these materials used. And of course, the blame lies primarily on the contractors themselves. And that's why all the management, the top management, representing this particular company had now been arrested and charged for manslaughter. But on the other hand, there is also the question whether the regulations themselves need to be reviewed, and whether, of course, there is sufficient fighting equipment and access to larger firefighting vehicles in the kind of narrow streets characterize many congested cities, including Hong Kong. So there are indeed a number of other questions that need to be answered, and the government is coming to grips with them.
Indeed, sir, requesting you to stay on with us as we're tracking further updates as far as this tragic blaze and the aftermath is concerned. We're now learning that a Hong Kong University student, Miles Kwan, has now been arrested after launching an online petition demanding an independent investigation into the deadly fire at the Wang Fuk Court housing complex. Kwan, who is distributing flyers, called for improvements to prevent future disasters. Local media reports say that he was detained by National Security Police for suspicion of sedition. The petition, which garnered significant support, outlined 4 key demands, including a probe into the causes of the fire. Listen in to what Miles has stated.
而呢啲嘅情緒、呢啲嘅嬲、呢啲嘅唔開心、呢啲嘅惋惜，其實我覺得唔可以淨係焗喺心入邊。呢啲嘅情緒要俾大家知道，大家係同樣地憤怒，大家同樣地唔開心，大家同樣地為呢個地方變成咁樣而覺得好唔開心，而真係想改進。係啦，我相信係改進嘅，我哋係需要去改進。我哋要嘅就係真係好確實嘅一啲承諾。我哋例如係要安置居民，係真係確實咁樣去承諾，係真係望清楚呢一件事背後係咪有好嚴重、好即係好即係好交錯嘅力喺度，然後令到啲人禍突然發生。我哋要政府承諾嘅係，佢唔係淨係解決咗一次意外就算，佢真係要去預防呢啲意外。而當咁多人已經係面臨災難，好多人面臨創傷死難嘅時候，其實我哋仲要花心力去講、去揣摩邊啲嘢講得唔講得。然後我哋見到我哋官員亦都唔係花緊心力喺呢個災難上面嘅時候，我覺得我哋係唔應該再忍落去，我哋要真係誠實咁面對自己感受，並且俾啲感受出嚟。如果呢啲嘅意見都係煽動或者係踩緊佢底線嘅話，咁我覺得我已經唔可以再預示任何嘅後果，只能夠做自己真誠地相信。
Stay with us on the broadcast is Mr. Andrew K.P. Leung. We've just heard what the student had to say. He, in fact, opened by stating and claiming that what took place, the tragedy that took place, is a man-made disaster. I wanted to understand from you, in context of his arrest, does a petition really constitute sedition? As he's just stated at the moment, the focus should be on just tackling the aftermath of this disaster, finding out what really happened, rather than being worried about what someone can say or not say, and quashing demands for accountability.
Well, of course, Hong Kong has always been a city of open petitions and also dissent. But the kind of dynamics have been unfortunately infected by the past so-called umbrella movement and the kind of anti-government, anti-Beijing protests in the past, and also tinged with a degree of foreign intervention, the so-called riots that disrupted Hong Kong's peace and stability, that led to the enactment of the national security law. Beijing was actually forced into enacting such law because of the huge disruption of social order and the direct challenge of Beijing's sovereignty over the territory. But as far as this particular case is concerned, I'm not familiar with the background of the student because in spite of the dying down of the protests, there are still remnant elements associated with this movement. So I'm not familiar with that. But on the other hand, I think that the government is facing increasing demands for looking into the rules and regulations. And as I mentioned, various other aspects, the management of these housing estates, whether they are up to the job. And for example, fire alarms are not working, and so why? And whether or not there is sufficient the rules and standards are really up to date. So I think the government is coming to grips with it. But as far as this particular student is concerned, unfortunately, it is I'm not familiar with the background of the student. But ultimately, of course, the government has got to be aware of these elements that remain that could use this opportunity to disrupt social stability.
Indeed, Beijing is concerned of this spiraling out of control. With that said, I'd like to thank you for taking out time, of course, sharing your analysis of what's taken place, and of course,